So thank you for joining in time. This class is going to be from 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. We don't have any time to waste. Great to have you here. We have 22 participants here. So welcome to this training. This is Introduction to C# Programming. It's a programming course for developers and software testers. My name is Patricia. I'm a tutor on Blue Sky Citadel. And today we are going to be talking about C# programming, the basics, and the lectures would be delivered by Onyi and Ike Odukudu. But just before we go on into the actual lecture, I would like to go through a bit of housekeeping rules here so that we are all aware of what we need to do so we can enjoy the delivery of this course. So first and foremost, I would like to say, please, if you do have questions, put the questions in the chat when the lecture is going on, so I can answer the questions. We don't want the tutor to be interrupted, so that the flow of the delivery would be smooth, and your questions are being answered at the point where you are at the point where you need the questions to be answered. We don't really want distractions. We don't want the tutor to be distracted as well. So please put your questions in the chat, and there will be at some point the tutor could ask you to participate, because we want this to be interactive as well. Would ask you to respond to a few questions from what she's delivering. So please make sure you are participating, because it is in participating that you understand fully what is being taught. So thank you for that. We'll quickly go through the table of contents now. So as part of this lecture, you're going to be getting the introduction to C# basics, the syntax in C#. C# is a programming language, as we all know. So you're going to be introduced to what a variable is, the data types, operators, different types of variables that you can use in C# when you're writing your program. So we are also going to touch on conditional statement. This is where you have the if statements and all of that. And then you're also going to be learning the C# methods, C# classes, everything relating to object-oriented programming languages. And we know that all of these would have come from a particular resource, and we've used W3 Schools, Geek for Geeks, because you would want to go back to practice, to read up. So Udemy, there are relevant videos on YouTube as well that you can search up, and we have all the Microsoft Learning Academy as well, and we have tutorial point and among other resources that you can look at. And we hope that in the course of this training as well, you would know what is required and what is needed, that you need to have, that you need to know. And one thing that is important is an IDE. So you need to have Visual Studio, an IDE. It is an integrated development environment. Is used to write your code, compile your code, debug your code, and monitor resources as well. And Visual Studio IDE is a Microsoft product, and you're going to need this as well for you to be able to write your C# program. Where can you get it? The link is right there. That's the link for you to download your Visual Studio IDE to write your C# programming. So you're going to use go into that link. That's the visualstudio.microsoft.com/vs/community, and you go through the download process. You click on the download. You download your Visual Studio. You get the executable file. You download that. That's the installation guide there for you. And once you click on that and you start to download on your computer, you're going to see you get to the point where you see the Visual Studio installer, and you can wait for the download to complete. When the download is completed, you can move on to click on your modify or install button, and you select the appropriate development feature. That's the .NET Desktop development. You select that, and yeah, that is it. Thank you. And you click on modify or install button, basically, and that takes you, yeah, thank you, and that takes you to the page where you have the option to launch your Visual Studio. It is an IDE. Please make a note of that. An integrated development environment is a software application. That's just the platform that Microsoft provides for you to be able to write your program. And once you've done that, you get to create a new project. You go through the process of creating a new project, and that is it. And once you create your new project, you select your console app, because that is where you want to start your programming from. You want to start from the console app. So you select that, and we all know, I'm sure some of us are familiar with this. Hello World is usually like the famous project name you can start any programming training with. You find Hello World anywhere. So that's the basic installation process. So you know what you need, how we can get what you need to get started for your C# programming. So select your target framework from there, .NET Core 3.1. That is what we have on Visual Studio 2019. And you click on create, and that is you on your first program.cs file. That's your project. Your Hello World has opened up that program.cs file for you, and that is where we start from tonight. I'll hand over to Oyin to take you on from here. Please remember, put your questions in the chat. Thank you, and have a nice training session tonight.
Thank you very much. So moving on, I hope everyone can hear me clearly, and hopefully I'm audible as well. So moving on, we are going to be looking into C# programming, and I'm pretty sure we've probably heard C, C# or C++. So they are all under the C programming language framework and everything like that. So for the C#, it is basically an object-oriented programming created by Microsoft, and it runs on the .NET framework, just as our previous facilitator has said. And the C# is also from the C family. And like I mentioned before, you've probably heard other popular languages like C++, Java, C#, Python, Ruby, JavaScript, and all. So C# is basically used for mobile applications, web applications, desktop applications, database applications, and also for gaming as well. And the reason why we use C# is because it is easy to learn and also to use. And there's a huge community support available online that obviously open source as well. And also it is close to the C++, and the Java programming language. And it is easy for programmers to switch between the different programming languages available out there. And it is also one of the most popular programming language in the world also. So now, currently, we have mentioned that we're going to be using the Visual Studio as our IDE. An IDE means Integrated Development Environment. And that is the IDE we'll be using to edit and also compile and run the C# codes we are going to be writing. And the next thing we're going to look at, which is right on my screen here, is what I've called the C# syntax. And I know this can be a bit confusing for now, but we're going to look into what each of them mean as we go into the different topics later on in these sessions. So we currently have the template. So as I'm going to be talking theoretical with you, we would also be looking into the practical side as well, where I bring up my own Visual Studio to show you the different things I'm going to be speaking about today. So right now we have this method that is already, or this C# project that is called Hello World. And this is basically printing out the Hello World sentence. It would also print out press any key to exit. And we also have this action here that says read line. So this is basically part of the C# syntax. And the first line that we have is the .NET framework namespace. And the next thing that we have is the namespace name. And this is basically what we also call your project name as well, which has been called Hello World. And we're going to be using a different name today. And then the other thing that we have is the program, which is referred to as the class name. And we have some specific keywords, or we have some specific keywords as well. So the first we have here is called static, which is a keyword. And we also have the void, which is a return type. And the method name that we have here is called main. And console.writeLine. So the writeLine is obviously a method to write text to the console. So we're going to be looking at how to write all of this when we move into using the Visual Studio Code later on in the class. Right, so the next thing we're going to look at is comments. So comments are very useful when you're writing any form of programming language. And this is to basically explain what your lines of codes are doing. And it's also useful when someone else is going to be taking over the project, or assuming you're on holiday or something and someone else is looking into your code. Having lines of comments there would be useful to the person, because he or she will be able to understand what you've done within the code or in the project as well. So we have single line comments and also multi-line comments as well. And this line of comments are going to be ignored by C# when it is running your tests. Right, so moving on, like I mentioned before, we have single line comments, and they are obviously denoted by 2 forward slashes. So an example that we have here is, this is a single line comment. So you can either write it above your line of code or just at the side of it. And the other one is called a multi-line comment. And you can see 2 lines of code here. And it starts with a forward slash and asterisk, and then it ends with asterisk and backward slash. So this is basically the opening side of the comment, and this is basically the closing side of the comment. And whatever you want to write down or make known is going to be between the 2 forward slashes. So we're also going to look into this when we move into Visual Studio as well. So moving on, we've got what we call identifiers. So the purpose of identifiers is for identification purposes, like the name implies, and it is identifiers are also user-defined names of program components, and it can be class names, method names, variable names, or even labels. So for instance, I have this block of code in here, and an example of the identifier that we have here is, the first one we have is the method name, which is called main. Another form of identifier that we have here is the variable name, which is called X. And another identifier we have here is the class name, which is called GFG. So the reasons for identifier is also for identification purposes. So variable names would obviously, variables are for storing specific values, and they also serve as containers. So the X obviously is going to be used to identify or stand as something else. So we're going to look into variables, methods, and class name as we go on within the sessions as well. But I just want to make it known to you that we've got things called comments, we've got C# syntax, we've got something called identifiers in C# as well. I know it may be a bit confusing right now, but as we go on into each of the lessons, they would all start becoming clearer as well. And also when you start practicing by yourself, and we also move into the practical side as well, you would obviously get a hand of it as well. So the next thing we're going to look at is rules for defining identifiers in C#. Just as we have rules in JavaScript or Java, we've also got rules in C# as well for defining identifiers. And the first one we have is only alphanumeric characters are allowed. And this is where we have the underscores, the digits, and the letters as well. So these are the only characters that can be used to define your identifiers. So a valid or an invalid example of an identifier would be, so this is an invalid example of an identifier. And a valid example is what we have seen just in the previous slide. So a valid example is GFG. A valid example is main. A valid example is X. You can all see these ones are obviously all letters, but if you want to have one that's go an underscore, you can have something like GFG underscore. And this is a valid example of an identifier. And another rule is identifiers are case sensitive. And what I mean by this is GFG and GFG, they are entirely different. They are not going to be seen as the same when you are in C#. So this is a different identifier name, and this is obviously a different identifier name. So identifiers are case sensitive. Another rule is they cannot contain white space. You cannot have something like GF space G. You can either have GFG or GF underscore G. White spaces are not allowed. And then we have reserved words. So we have something in some sets of programming languages like C# or Java that we call reserved words or keywords. So these are specific words that are already assigned to a specific programming language and cannot be used for anything else. So if I'm to think of an example off the top of my head, an example would be, I'm guessing, int, int. That is a specific type of reserved words that you cannot use as identifier names. So another rule is identifiers cannot start with digits. And I've given an example here. We have an identifier called 457 gigs. That is not a valid identifier. But I did say that identifiers need to include digits, which are obviously numbers. So you can have gigs 457, that is a valid identifier. But when you have numbers preceding your identifier names, those are going to be regarded as invalid identifiers. So next up, we have what we call variables, right? So when we hear the word variables, so they are just basically referred to as a container or a memory or a piece of a computer memory, because they are basically placeholders for information that we can temporarily access later on. And when we also hear the word variables, variables are for storing data values of different types. So an example of variable is int, which we've seen earlier in here. So int is a data type. A variable here is x. So the x is considered a variable, and it is basically a container. It is storing a value. So we've got two ways to present your variables or the variable syntax. So we have the declaration and initialization, which is specifying the data type, the variable name, and then giving it a value. Or you can do the declaration and initialization differently. So I think this is the point where we move into where we move into Visual Studio for you to see a practical side to what I've been talking about so far. So I'm going to look into variables, and I'm going to look into the different syntax that we have. So we have the declaration and initialization syntax, and then we have one that will do the declaration differently and then the initialization separately as well. And we are also going to look into the comments. We would also see the C# syntax, and we would also see the identifiers as well, because those are the main topics we've spoken about so far. So I'm going to bring up my Visual Studio. So once you've installed your Visual Studio, you will usually get this I don't know what to call it, but you get this particular pop-up. And the reason why I have projects here is because I have used Visual Studio previously, and my previous projects are been listed here. But if you are a new user to Visual Studio, you would not have anything in here. And all you need to do is to click on New. And mine is going to look a bit different because I'm using a Mac laptop. But Windows laptop is self-explanatory, and that was what was discussed at the start of this class. So you can just watch the videos and then follow that specific step. But if you're using a Mac, you click on New, and then I have .NET, and I'm just going to click on the console project and make sure my programming language is being, like C# is being selected as a programming language here. And then I'm going to click on Next. And this is where I specify my project name. So I'm going to call it First Program. And this is my location that I want to use, which is correct. And I'm just going to click on Create. Right, so let me just move this here and expand it. Right, so this is my Visual Studio. And like I've mentioned previously, this is how a C# syntax is going to look like. The first thing we have here is a .NET framework system. The next thing we have here is the program name, and it is also referred to as a project name as well. And I've called mine First Program. And the next thing we have here is the class name, which is called main class. And I have my method name called main. And I have a line of code in here, which is basically telling C# to print out the word hello world. So in order to run my C# code, all I need to do is to click on run. And I think for the window devices is a bit different. So you have to click on, you probably have like another section in here that has the run button as well. So by the next class, I would try to find someone that has a Windows laptop so that you can see how that looks like. But for today, we're going to use a Mac. So when I'm running my test, I'm basically going to click on the run button here, and that should print out hello world for me because that was what I specified within this method. So if I click on that, that is going to build my project and then execute the hello world command. So you can see down here in the terminal, we have hello world. And then if I'm to make any change in here, so I can say, hello world and welcome. So once I run this thing, I'm expecting C# to print out hello world and welcome. So if I click on run, that is going to print out hello world and welcome. And I can obviously print out other things as well. So console dot write line, and you can see C# also basically gives you a list that you can auto populate from. So I'm going to click on write line, a bracket, and double quote inside of it. And I need a semicolon at the end. So if I run this, I'm going to get 2 lines of code being printed out. One would say hello world and welcome, and the other would say my name is Oyin ... So let's give that a run. Yep, so it says hello world and welcome. My name is Oyin ... So this is just a simple C# syntax. And like I mentioned for the comment, I can have a line of comments here and say, this is my first programming code. And like I mentioned, C# is going to ignore all of this because it has already established double slashes as single line comments. So if I run my code now, this is not going to be executed because it's just going to be ignored. And running that, you can see this is my first programming code is not executed because it is a comment. And if I'm going to be doing a multi-line comments, like I mentioned, a slash, asterisk, asterisk, and a slash. Then you write your block of comments between the 2 asterisks. So I can say, this is my first programming lesson and C# is fun. I can't wait to keep coding. So you can see this is the start of the comment and this is the end of the comment. And everything on lines 11 and 12 is going to be ignored because they are considered as comments. So if I'm to run this now, you can see they are not getting printed out. They are basically regarded as comments and they are just basically skipped or ignored. So hello world and welcome, which is for this one, line 9. And then I have my name is Oyin, which is for line 13. Terminal, yeah, this one. Right. So the next thing we're going to look at now is variables. And like I mentioned in the notes, we have two ways that you can declare your variables. You can have the declaration and the initialization, and then you can also have the declaration separate and then the initialization separate. So we're going to give them a try now. And I'm going to be using comments within my codes so that you can, because like I mentioned previously, comment is it's always good to implement comments in your code because it makes it easy to read. Assuming you've not opened or programmed with C# in a while and you just want to refresh your memory. And if you add comments in your code previously, once you come back, it will give you an understanding of what you've done on specific lines. So I'm going to be adding lines or blocks of comment to my code from now on as we progress in the class. So the next thing that we're going to look at is the variable declaration, and we're going to start with the declaration and the initialization syntax, first of all. So variable declaration and initialization. And the syntax basically is you specify your data type, your variable name, and then assign a value to it. So we're going to start with the first one, which is the data type. So my data type here is string. My variable name is name. And I'm going to assign a value to it. And the value is Oyin. And I need to add my double colon at the end as well. So this is basically the declaration and the initialization variable syntax, where I have my data type. We're going to look into data type shortly. And I have my variable name, which is my container, and I have a value. So basically, my container is taking the value of Oyin, and that is being stored in the name container. So if I want to print out this, the value of the name container now, or the name variable, all I need to do is to specify the line of code that I'm going to use to print that out. So that's going to be console dot write line. And I just need to specify the variable name here, name, and my semicolon at the end of my bracket. So if I'm to run this, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. I'm not meant to add a double colon. If I'm to run this now, this is going to print out name equals Oyin. So my name here is Oyin. And that is because I already declared a variable value to that. So this is the declaration and initialization variable syntax. And the other one I mentioned was the declaration separate and then the initialization separate as well. So we have variable declaration. And this is where we have integer So the variable declaration is only going to have the data type and the variable name. And then if I'm going to have the initialization, so initialization is where when you give the variable name a value or you assign a value to the variable. So all I'm going to do now for the initialization would be to call my variable name, favnum, and then assign a value to it, which is 20. So if I'm going to be printing this out, all I need to do is to do the console dot write line. And then I need to call the variable name that I want to be printed out. So I'm going to call it favnum, which is the one that has the value I want printed out. And I need to add my double colon. And I'm just going to comment out the previous lines of code that I have. So if you want to comment out in C#, in front of the code, you just need to add a double slash, and that basically comments out the line of code and it's going to be ignored. But if you want to comment out a block of code, you just need to highlight it and then do a control question mark if you're using a Windows, or a control question mark if you're using a Mac device. So if I do control question, beg your pardon. If you're using a Windows, you need to use control question mark. If you're using a Mac, you need to use command question mark. So I'm using a Mac, so I'm going to do command question mark, and that basically comments out those lines of code I've highlighted. So I can have maybe like 20 lines of code. I don't want to be putting slash, 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 slash in front of each one of them. So I can do them all at once by just highlighting it and then doing control question mark or command question mark. And if I want to uncomment it out, I need to do the same thing, control question mark or command question mark. So that was just one thing I forgot to mention earlier. So I've basically commented out the previous lines of code that I have. And if I'm to run this again now, my variable declaration and initialization should run. And this one is going to print out OI, which is a string. And the next one is an integer data type, which takes in only digits. So this is going to print out the value of 20, which is what I have declared or specified. So if I click on run, I should have 2 lines of codes being printed out, the name and the number. So I have 20 and 20. So this is basically how you do the different variable declarations. So you can use the declaration and initialization, or you can have them separately where you have the declaration separate and then you can have the initialization separate as well. Right, so the next thing we're going to look at is what we call data types. So when we hear the word data type, so data types in C# basically specify the type and the size of variable values. And we have different categories of data types. We have the value data types, the pointer data types, and the reference data type. So we're going to be focusing on the value data type and most especially the predefined types. So you can obviously read more about the other ones. We're basically going to look into the most common ones that are used in C# programming for development and also for automation testing as well. And that is a predefined data type. And the ones where we have the int, the char, the bool or boolean, the float, double, long, short, decimal. So int basically refers to integer, like I mentioned previously. Right, so these are the major ones we're going to be looking into. So we have the int for the integer that stores all numbers between these ranges. The long stores all numbers as well, but between a larger digits range. And floats represent fractional numbers and for storing 6 to 7 decimal digits. Double stores up to 15 decimal digits. And then we also have the bool or the boolean, and it basically stores true or false values. So basically 1 or 0, true or false values. And char stores single characters or letters, and it has to be surrounded by single quotes as well. And then we have the string, which stores a sequence of characters. So we've used string values before. We've used integer as well. So we're going to look into the different examples or ways to use this specific data types. So next up, okay, let's quickly look into how to use the different data types in your Visual Studio. So I'm going to add a new line of comment here that says C# data types. And first up, we have the int or the integer. And like I mentioned, this basically stores all number from a specific range. So integer, and I'm going to be using the declaration and initialization method in this instance. So for the integer, I'm going to give it a variable name called sum total, assign a value of 1000. And then I'm going to do the same for the other data types that I have here. So for long, float, double, boolean, char, and string. So I'm just going to quickly type that up. And for the long data type, it usually ends in an L. So this is going to make you aware, or anyone aware, that this particular number is going to be using the long data type, because it basically stores a larger range of whole number. So next up, we have the floats. And then we have the double. You can see that the float and the double have got F for float and D for double at the end. So this is just to make everyone or anyone aware that the numbers are within a specific range, and it also specifies the data type that is going to be used or is meant to be used as well. So any number ending in capital F or F, you know it is relating to float. Anyone ending in D is double, and anyone ending in L is long. And anyone without no letter ending it is obviously an integer. So next up, we have char. And this basically takes a single character. And then we have Boolean, and this takes true or false value. And finally, we have string. Right. So I have obviously declared my variables: sum, total, L, F, D, your grade, short greeting is C#, difficult. So those are my variable names. They are my containers, and they all have values assigned to them. So the sum total variable has the value of 1000. Your grade variable has the value of A. The C# difficult variable has the value of false. So if I'm to run my line of code now, I'm going to ask everyone a question. So if I'm to run this line of code, is anything going to be printed out for these data types I've specified? What is going to be printed out? Or am I going to get anything if I run it? I'm just going to wait for responses in the chat. am I going to get any value if I'm to run that? Anybody? Okay, I can see somebody said no. Anybody?
Yes, you will get the values. Yes.
So somebody said yes, somebody said no. Any other person? Okay, somebody else said no. So thank you. So the two people that said no are correct. And that is because I have not given C# any command to print out the variable values for me. So in order to do that, I need to give C# the command to print those values out, and that is by typing console.writeLine and then specifying the variables I want to be printed out. So that is what I'm going to do now. So for instance, in order to print out my integer sum total variable here, all I need to do is to say console.writeLine, and then my integer name or my integer variable name is sum total. Right, so this is going to print out the sum total value for me, which is 1000. So if I'm to give that a run now, yep. So down here, you can see integer equals 1000. So that is because I basically specified what I want C# to print out for me. So if I want C# to print out the rest of the other variables that I've not yet specified, I just need to give C# the go ahead, and then it basically prints it out for me. So let me see. I'm just going to copy and paste this a couple of times because I don't want to type too much. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. And I'm going to change the string values and also the variable names as well. So the next one I wanted to print out for me is long. It has the variable name of L, float, F, double, D, char, your grade, boolean, and then I have string. Right. So now, if I'm to run this, I should expect long value to be printed out, my float value should be printed out, and all the other ones should also be printed out. So let's give that a go. Yep, you can see all of them declared here. We have the integer value of 1000, long has this value of, I think, 350 billion or something. Float has a value of 6.74. Double is 35.99. Char has a value of 8. And these are basically all of the values that I specified within my code that are being printed out on the terminal. So whatever you tell C# to print out, or whatever you specify in your lines of code is what is going to get printed out. So that's just basically how the data types work, and also the value that gets printed out as well. So there's just one more thing I'm going to do. And this is to show you some other things about the float and the double. And I know I mentioned previously that floats, I think I mentioned previously that floats can store up to 6 to 7 decimal numbers or digits, and the double can store up to 15 decimal digits. So let us give that a try, or to try out an example of how that works. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to declare a float and call it F1 and give you a value of 65. And I'm just going to copy and paste the float and the double. And change the values here to F1 and D1. And I'm going to comment these ones out so they don't overcrowd the console. So these ones are not going to get printed out. So now if I'm to run lines 53 and 54, I want them to print out the values of F1 and D1 for me. So the reason why I have 65 E3F is this is going to give me a value of 65,000. So the 3F basically specifies the number of zeros. So in this case, I'm going to be expecting 3 zeros at the end of 65. And in this case, I'm going to be expecting 5 zeros at the end of 35. So if we give that a run, you can see for 65, we have 3 zeros. For 35, we have 5 zeros. So this is basically how you declare numbers that are going to be like of a larger value or a larger size. So instead of typing 65,000 when I'm writing my code, I can write 65 E3F. If I want to type 35 or 350,000, I can write 35 E4D, something like that. So those are just the ways that you use the different data types. So next, we are going to be looking into user inputs. And user inputs is when users are allowed to input values from the terminals when the C# code is running, so from in here. So far, we've not been able to type anything from the console, but now we are going to write some specific lines of code in this particular template, and we are going to be inputting the value from our terminal down here. So how do we do that? We obviously use the same way we've been giving C# the commands to print things to the console or to the terminal. So I'm going to go with console.writeLine. And then I'm going to say enter username, my semicolon at the end. And this would basically, I'm going to put an instruction here, type your username and press enter. And the next line of code is going to allow me to enter the username that I want to specify. So that's going to be string username. So read line is accepting values from the user of the system. Write line is basically going to print out the values for you. So that's the difference between write line and read line. And this is going to get a string from user. And the next thing I'm going to do is to print out the username that is being entered by the user. And how do I print out? Console.writeLine. Plus sign, and then my variable name that I'm going to be entering. Right. So let us give this a try. I'm going to comment out the first lines and also the variable declaration as well, so we do not get confused. Right. So in here, let me put a comment here. Print the value of the username entered. Value of the string entered by the user. So this line of code is going to print out enter username to the screen. And then for the next line of code, the user or whoever is using the system needs to enter a value into the system. And thereafter, this value is going to be picked up and then printed out back to you. So if we give this a go now, we are going to have the first line, which says enter username. And then I need to enter in a value. So I've entered OEOO, and then I press enter. And you can see the next line of code is printed out to me. And that is, just a minute. So next line of code is printed out to me, which is the username that I have entered. So it says username is OEOO. So this is basically how you use read lines and write lines, where you need to accept some values from the users of the system. So these are the specific lines of code that you use. So in order to accept a string value or any value from your users, you need to use console.readline, and console.writeLine is going to print out whatever value you've specified within the two double quotes. So that's just how we get values from users. So the next thing we're going to look at is operators. And you've probably seen some of these operators before. You have definitely seen them before. And then we're going to be looking into how we can use them in C#. So operators are basically used to perform different operations and operands, and they are the fundamentals or the foundation of any programming language. And some of these are obviously similar, or some of the operators are similar to the way they work in other programming languages as well, like Java. And we're going to be looking into the different types of operators today based on functionalities. So we currently have the arithmetic operators, the logical, the assignment, conditional, and the relational operator as well. Right, so first up, we have the arithmetic operators, and this is basically the, they used to perform like mathematical or arithmetic operations. And that's where we have the addition sign, the subtractions, multiplication, division, increment and decrement, and also the modulus. So the division basically divides, multiplication multiplies, subtracts, deducts, and the modulus basically returns the remainder of the first operand. So the next one we're going to look at is the relational or the comparison operators. And these ones, they are used for comparison reasons, or for comparing two different values. And this is where you have your greater than and less than, your less than, you have your greater than, less than, greater than or equals to, less than or equals to, and then we have the equal signs or equal to signs where we have two equal signs, and then we have the not equal to. So I'm going to be looking into different examples to see how they all work. And next up, we have the assignment operators. So the assignment operators, we have a couple of them, and I'll basically put their names at the sides as well. The simple assignment, add assignment, subtract assignment, the modulus assignment, the right shift assignment, bitwise and they're basically used to assign a value to a table. And you can obviously see, for instance, the and sign, we have x plus equals to 3 is also the same as x equals to x plus 3. So in a case where you don't want to write the x twice or your variable twice and you're going to be doing an addition, this is another way to write it. And the same also goes for the minus as well. X minus equals 3 is also the same as x equals x minus 3. And the same goes for all the other operators as well. So next up, we have the logical. And for the logical, this is where we have the logical and the logical or, and also the logical not as well. And this is going to be used when we are comparing two different sets of conditions. That is where we use the logical operators. And then we have the conditional operator. And this is just a common and simple syntax that needs to be followed when you're using the conditional operator. And then in this case, it takes 3 operands. And we're going to have the condition on the left-hand side, the first expression and the second expression. And what this means is, if the condition is true, then the first expression is going to be executed and it becomes the result. Or if the condition is false, then the second expression is going to be executed and that becomes the result. So we're going to quickly look into the different operators using different examples. And we're going to move to Visual Studio now. So I am just going to comment out this line and C# operators. Right. X equal 10. And then y equals to 5. And now I'm going to start with each of the, so this is the arithmetic one. Arithmetic operators. And this is where we have the plus, minus, multiplication, division, and the modulus. So we're going to look into how each of them work shortly. So for the addition is basically the plus sign. So that's x plus y, simple addition. X plus y. And I'm going to print out the value of that. Right line. Cool. I'm going to copy this a couple of times just to save me the stress of having to type them. And I'll just make some changes. Going to be looking at subtraction. Division. Division. Oh, that was a mistake. I need to change the comment. Multiplication and right. So I need to change this one as well. Minus, division, multiplication, and the modulo sign. And for my expected values, for the addition, I'm expecting it to be 10 plus 5, 15. Subtraction, 10 minus 5, 5. The division, 10 divided by 5, it should be 2. For the multiplication, 10 times 5, 50. And for the division, for the modulus, 10 divided by 5 is 2, and there's no remainder at the end. So my modulus is meant to be 0. So that's just basically how you use the arithmetic operators. And we've obviously declared our values at the top, and they are getting picked up wherever we call the variable names. So x here is taking the value of 10 because that is what is assigned to it. Y is taking the value of 5 because that is what is assigned to it. And that is what is used throughout the rest of the lines of code here. So x is 10 and y is equal to 5. And that is what is also used to perform the arithmetic operations that are being specified. So if I'm going to run this now, all the answers I've stated at the start should all be printed out for me. And they're going to be printed out nicely because I've already specified how I want it to be printed out. For the addition, I'm expecting 15, subtraction 5, division 2, multiplication 50, and the modulo 0. The modulo is basically the remainder of the division you've done. So assuming you have 10 divided by 3, 10 divided by 3 is 3, and it remains 1. So the modulo in that instance is going to be 1. But because we don't have a remainder when we divide 10 by 5, so the remainder is 0. So that's why the value of the modulo operator here is coming out as 0. So next up, we are going to look into the next operator, which I have called, or it is called the relational operator. And we're just going to see how that also works as well. And we're going to do that quickly because I still need to look into some other math operations or calculations that you can use in C#. Right. Cool. So the next one we have is relational operators. And I am just going to copy a block of code I already have. So relational operators, they are the less than, greater than or equals to, not equals to, and they are always meant to give you a true or a false value, and you would see why. So I'm just going to copy a block of code I already have inside one of my other projects just to save me the time of typing. Right, and the reasons why you're seeing the red lines is because the X, the Y, and the results have been declared previously at the top. So in most cases, your variable names, not in most cases, in all cases, your variable names are meant to be unique. You cannot have two X, like XX anywhere within your project. It needs to be either X1 or X, or you call it something else that is meaningful. But in order to save me time, I'm going to comment out the previous one that I already have or I've already declared, and everything else should be fine. So the red lines are obviously gone. So this is going to be looking into the relational operators. And like I mentioned, this is the equals to sign. So it's basically two equal signs. And this one is a greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and not equal to operator. So relational operators, when you're using them, your value is meant to be true or false. And that is because of the action that is getting performed. So for instance, if we go to the equal to operator, we are basically saying, is 5 equal to 10? Because your X is 5 and your Y is 10. Is 5 equal to 10? True or false? False. So I'm expecting a false value here. Next one, is 5 greater than 10? False. I'm expecting a false value here. The next one, is 5 less than 10? True. So I'm expecting a true value here. And next one is 5 greater than or equal to 10? Is 5 greater than or equal to 10? So that's false. Next one is 5 less than or equal to 10? 5 is less than or equal to 10. True. And then the next one, 5 is not equal to 10. I'm expecting a true value here because 5 is not equal to 10. So if I'm to run this now, all the values or the results I've specified verbally should be what is going to come out. So I said the first two are meant to be false. The next one is true. The next one is false. And the last one is true. And that was what was specified here. So basically, C# is basically just performing the action that you give it to do or the arithmetic operation you tell it to perform. You can obviously do it paper and pen, but using a programming language or an IDE makes it easier for you to do the analysis. And the reason why we're obviously doing all of these basics is because they are going to be useful when you're looking into complex development, not like complex, but like advanced development or advanced programming. So that is why the basics are essential. And that's why we are looking into them. So that is us done with the relational operators. And then if we look into some of the assignment operators, we're not going to look into every single one of them. So some of the assignment operators, we're going to be looking into them now. And like I mentioned, the assignment operators is basically assigning values to the variables. So we have x plus equal to 3 is the same as x equals to x plus 3. So I'm going to see that in action shortly. Right. So I'm just going to copy the lines of code again that I have in a different project to save me time when it comes to typing. Yep, great. Yeah. So this is assignment NT operators. And I'm going to paste the lines of code I copied from a previous project I have. Paste. And I've basically assigned or done a simple assignment for the first one, where I've assigned 15. I've assigned x to a value of 15. So integer x equals 15. That's just a simple variable assignment and initialization that I've done there. And then I've done x plus equal to 10. So what this means is x equals to 15 plus 10, and that is going to give me a different value. So now x is going to be having a new value assigned to it because of the assignment I've done. So what I mean is, in this instance now, this is going to be x equals to, what's the initial value of x at the top here? 15 plus 10. So now my new value of x for the add assignment, which is because of the plus sign, so x here is going to be 25. Now, I have a new value of x that I've assigned here. So this one is going to be ignored. The first assignment at the top would be ignored because I've basically assigned a new value of 20. And that is what's going to be used for this operation here. So here I'm going to have x equal to, what's the new value of x that I have stated here? So that's going to be 20 minus 5. So I'm expecting the subtract assignment to give me a value of 15. Now, I have a new value of x here as well. It is called 15. So this is going to be 15 times 5. And that is due to the action or the operation I want to perform here. So x asterisk equals 5. That's going to be x equals to 15 times 5. And that should give me 75 for the multiply assignment. For the division assignment now, I have a new value of x as well, which is 25. So this is going to be 25 divided by 5 based on the operation I want to perform here. And I should get a value of 5 here for the division assignment. So now I've given x a new value, which is 25. So the one at the top that is 15 is going to be ignored. The new value of 25 is getting picked up. So for the operation I want to perform here, I want C# to tell me the remainder when I divide 25 by 5, and the remainder is going to be 0. So that's going to be x equals 25 modulus 5. So I'm expecting 0 to be my answer here. So if I'm to run this code now, all of the answers I've given should also be displayed in the terminal at the bottom here. Right, so add assignment is 25, 15 plus 10. Subtract is 15, multiply is 75, division is 5, and the modulo is 0. So that's just basically how the assignment operator works. So the last two we're going to look at is the logical and the conditional. Right, so quickly we would look at the okay, let's look at the conditional. So, and I think that is where we're going to stop today, and then we'll continue the next ones in the next class. Cool. So for the conditional, we have conditional operators. And like I mentioned, the conditional operators, he has a condition, a question mark, that was intentional. Then the first result, the semicolon, and the second result. And the first result is going to be executed if the condition is true. Or if the condition is false, the first result is going to be ignored and the second result is going to be executed. So now let's test our knowledge here. So we have x equals to 5 and y equals to 10. Cool. So this is our first condition, the question mark. Our first result and our second result is y. So x equals to y. 5 is greater than y. True or false? False. So who can tell me what the value of this expression is going to be, or what expression is going to be executed? X is greater than 5. True or false? False. So what is going to be my value? Is it X or is it Y? Based on the explanation that I've given here, what would be the value, or what expression is going to be executed? X is greater than 10. 5 is greater than 10. True or false? False. So what is going to be executed? X or Y? Or what's my answer going to be? Someone said Y. Any other response? Y. Correct.
Y,
so
Y.
The answer is Y. Thank you very much. So looking into the next one, X is less than Y. 5 is less than 10. True or false? True. So the answer or the expression that's going to be executed is X, and that's going to give me a value of 5. The first one is going to give me a value of 10, and the second one is going to give me a value of 5. So let's give that a run. So we have the results. The first one, taking the value of y equals to 10. And the second one, x equals to 5. So that's just how the conditional operator works. So I'm just going to stop the lesson here and just pick up any questions that anybody have now. Any questions, you can put them in the chat box.
Thanks, Oyi. I guess everyone has been following closely. We don't have questions as much as expected in the chat, but I think everyone should feel free to ask their questions now. You've got 5 minutes before the end of this class. Sounds like they've listened to a very good teacher and they all understand. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
I have a question too.
Like this programming, what is the importance of it?
I think I've kind of mentioned the other start of the call. So when you are looking into, so if you want to get involved in web development, mobile app development, or even game programming or anything like that, one of the programming languages that you can use to build your web applications or anything like that is C#. So that is, C# is there, Java is there, JavaScript, Python, and that's just the importance of programming. And if you're looking into becoming a developer, a C# developer, you need to know the basics of C programming. If you're looking into software testing with C#, you also need the basics of C# as well, because that is what's going to be used there. It's just the same as if you are going to be a Java developer, you need to know the basics of Java programming. The same also goes for JavaScript developer as well. You need to know the basics of JavaScript. So that's just the importance of programming. I don't know if that kind of answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other question? We have just 3 minutes left.
Yeah, just a quick one. Sorry, this question. I have have a question to ask about the programming. So yeah, we all know that we're C sharp. Basically you can use it with our Visual Studio for our testing. So my question is, can we, apart from C sharp, we can use other programming languages, right?
Yes.
Yeah, good. So from your experience or from whatever you distance, so can we use basically C sharp for testing, or C sharp or Java, or it depends on the platform and the framework?
Okay, so when it comes to software testing, there are different programming languages you could use as well. There is software testing with C sharp, with Ruby, with Python, with JavaScript, with Java. So it just kind of depends on your preference. So that's just the programming language you would go for. And in most cases, when you're using C sharp, people tend to use Visual Studio to do that for their software testing. And in most cases, when you're using Java for your software testing, people do lean to IntelliJ. So that was why I mentioned IntelliJ during one of the slides, because that is what I use, IntelliJ and Java. So that is what I am interested in, and that's what I lean towards. So when you are using C sharp, you will probably be using Visual Studio for your software testing framework.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would also like to add to that. When you want to, for example, if you're going to be using the programming language for testing, the popular ones out there, C sharp, Java, and JavaScript now, for software testing within the heavy data environment, that's where you get to use Python, because I know some people would say, oh, I've heard about Python as well. So and if you know programming in C sharp, there's a tendency for you to pick up programming in Java as well. The same for if you know programming in Java, you would be able to pick up programming in C sharp. The difference between the two are the syntaxes. So it's we have the training for Java as well here on this platform. So whatever programming language you pick up, you should get comfortable with them either way. So that's my addition to this question. Thanks. So
So basically, there's no programming for Python. I mean, there's no learning for Python, right?
sorry,
What was your question?
There's no learning training for Python, just C sharp.
No, there isn't.
do you mean on this platform?
Yes.
For now, we have Python classes in the coding for kids class. For now, we don't have Python classes for the older class.
Okay, thank you.
We intend to do that later. Thank you.